3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and joining us as they do every single Thursday to talk Michigan football, basketball, hockey, you name it. The MGoBlog Roundtable crew. But today, yes, there was a game played, and if you guys will get your takes on what you saw coming off the bye. But the most pressing matter is the possible suspension that could come down as soon as today from the Big Ten. A suspension potentially Michigan head football coach Jim Harbaugh. To discuss that, good friend Brian Cook, man, started it all at MGoBlog. Brian, good morning. How are you? I know the feeling, man. That's how you are.
That's how I am. That's how I am.
I hear you. Also, Craig Ross. Craig, how are you this morning?
I'm fine, but I'm getting stupider with every article I read, except for Brian's and maybe Dan Wetzel's recent article.
Yeah, Dan Wetzel's the lone wolf in the forest. Clearly on this. All right. And then, of course, Seth Fisher. Seth, how are you this morning?
I'm pretty good, man. I spent a whole day completely separated from college football. We're talking college football. And, when you get away from the idiots, it's a lot easier to kind of just breathe for a moment and realize that, this thing is stupid and we're gonna get through it. Unfortunately, Michigan's repped all of this. So let's go. Let's go beat Penn State.
It is stupid, but you gotta. I won't call them stupid people, but they're allowing their emotions to drive them stupidly. And I mean, the opposing coaches.
Are you talking about Tony Petiti?
Oh yeah,
he's a stupid person.
Oh, you think he's what? Maybe he is. I mean,
he's a stupid person. Because he's got the biggest thing he has is Michigan, Ohio State, and he wants to turn this into something that the entire SEC can make fun of. That everyone you get a small little flash, you get all this interest all of a sudden, but you know what you're going to have afterwards? Michigan is not going to be on your side for anything. He's going to have to run a conference after this, and he just showed them that if you hate somebody, that let's say Penn State, Harbaugh retires. Penn State gets a new coach, and they dominate the conference, and Tony Petiti is in charge of it, and everyone wants to take down Penn State. And now he's shown all you have to do is just come up with whatever you want to whine about, and he'll take care of it. He is stupid. His first opportunity to show people what he's about, that he's fair, that he knows how to run a conference, and what's the first thing that's happening? He's letting Michigan State tell him that players are going to get hurt on the field over sign stealing. He repeats those actual words, and he's going to get his conference sued. That's the first thing he's done here. Stupid.
Brian Cook.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I would say stupid undersells it a bit. Stupid. He's backed himself into a corner at this point.
I mean, he hasn't really backed himself into a corner, I don't think. Like, if he comes out today,
and says what?
These guys were snowing me. Like,
and that's going to happen.
Well, no, but that's leadership, right? Saying I got duped here. These guys were telling me that this is the worst scandal in college football history when they're doing the exact same thing. We're not going to have any punishments. We're petitioning the NCAA to use helmet radios as soon as we possibly can. We hope to get it in next weekend, and everybody can shut up about all this forever. That's leadership. And there's going to be some coaches who are mad at you, but all those coaches are going to be fired in the near future anyway because they suck.
Yeah, Brian, it's more likely the moon will explode tomorrow.
I'm just saying,
that's going to happen.
I mean, this is why you don't hire a TV guy. This guy's never tried to actually be a public leader in his life. Yeah. And he's completely out of his depth. He went to Harvard Law. I mean, what are we talking about here? I'm saying when I see someone went to Harvard Law, I'm like, this guy's probably an idiot.
Well, I'll tell you this.
You misinterpret that.
Yeah.
If I somehow became president of the United States, I'm banning all Ivy League graduates from the U.S. government.
You know what?
Half of them are just there because their daddies are rich. Like, I mean,
the worst. I have to say this, Brian.
You don't get to be where he is without having a high IQ, but he has no common sense.
I don't buy that.
Zero common sense.
I don't buy that
because I don't understand how you can like just have Michigan's guys log off and then you get complained at, and then you find out later that they are lying to you. They are lying to your face. They think you are stupid, and they're trying to take advantage of that to take down the best team in the conference.
Well, they know he knows jack squat about football.
Well, yeah, but now he can read, right? I presume he can read. And if he can read and he reads the Wetzel article, if he reads the Auerbach article, if he reads everything that's going on with sign stealing nationwide, then he should be able to comprehend the fact that this gave Michigan basically no competitive advantage. It is so widespread that you would not be able to determine that Connor Stallions was doing something off board just because he had the other team's signals, because the other teams also had Michigan signals. Like, all it takes is a basic grasp of logic to put this in the trash bin and say, if you ever bring this up to me again, I am going to suspend you. But this guy doesn't really seem to have the cojones to be the Big Ten commissioner, and he's going to roll over and try to suspend Harbaugh.
Well, no one is mad about an apology, and I agree with you, Brian. And he could show leadership. He could come out and say, "Okay, Connor Stallions has been fired. I think that's appropriate." But otherwise, we're doing nothing until the NCAA is done. I jumped the gun. I was wrong. I apologize. Yeah, I'll change my mind. That ain't happening.
No, it's not.
Yeah, he should not care. Look, he should not care if Michigan did this. Like, if they did it, so freaking what? If it's a violation, so freaking what? You got 2 schools you got to care about. 2. The rest of them are just along for the ride. So they need to get in where they fit in. That, to me, is the common sense part of it. Now, I'm not saying that Michigan did it, that they knew about it. It seems pretty clear that Connor Stallions was doing some things. It stands to reason that if he was so prolific before he arrived as a full-time employee, that why would you even look at that? But you can hit him and say they lack of oversight. I'm with that. But if you want to come and nail one of my core institutions, you had better find out they've been paying players. They've been skirting all kinds of rules, because I am not going to forsake my cash cow for the likes of Rutgers or Indiana or Purdue. I don't give a damn. Those schools could jump by the wayside for us. All I care. It's about Michigan and Ohio State. And if you alienate one of those schools, you'll wind up. You probably never thought USC would leave the Pac-12, right? You said something last week, Brian, that resonated with me. I thought it was before. I was like, oh man, it's just emotion. But you had a great point, man. Start thinking about a future that involves you not in the Big Ten. That has to be not just a threat, but a strategy.
Well,
you are 100% right on that.
If
they come down like this, that's how Michigan needs to be thinking.
We have been sharing television revenue with Northwestern and Rutgers and Maryland and Iowa for years and years and years. Money is continually flowing out of Michigan's pockets into the pockets of the other schools in the Big Ten every year. So at some point, there's going to be a TV negotiation, and they're going to try to put together a super league, right? They're going to be like, wait, why do we have this dead weight? And Michigan, prior to this, was probably going to be like, no, I'm not interested in this because I have a ton of tradition. This is not what we want for our athletes. And now I think Michigan will be driving that train. They will be like, yes, Super League, you guys are gone. Ohio State, you can come. USC, Oregon, Washington, you can come. Michigan State, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not going to work out.
That's
Indiana,
where I apologize to the people.
Sorry. It's not going to work out.
100%. That's where I apologize to the people, man. I just didn't think that it would be all the other coaches. And I was wrong. Like, I was like, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan State. Obviously, James Franklin, because he's ridiculous like that. The usual suspects. I was like, there's no way that you got all the schools going hard in the paint on this. But no, it's all of them.
I don't think it is. I think there's a few holdouts. Like I'd be surprised if Kirk Ferentz gave two dangs about this.
Yeah. Now he cares about his own player just got suspended for gambling for like the rest of his career. They just and now they're going to change the rule on him. So he's pissed about the enforcement of rules right now anyway, not from the Big Ten, but the NCAA. I want to point out, though, this is not the first time USC has left the pack, because the Pacific Coast Conference used to exist out there. And what happened to the Pacific Coast Conference is exactly what's starting to happen here. There were schools that made a lot of money. They were mad that they were stuck with the schools that didn't make a lot of money. The schools that didn't make a lot of money were mad at the schools that made a lot of money, including USC and UCLA, were spending it on players. They were, cheating, right? And so they got a guy. They convinced their brand new commissioner that he had to go after them, that he has to go and get the cheaters. And USC said, if you go after us for this little stuff, we're leaving, and UCLA is coming with us. And that was going to be it. And Washington, who was on the side of the ones saying get the cheaters the whole time, Washington hated USC. As soon as they left the conference, they had to leave the conference too, because they're not going to stick around with Idaho. And what happened? They reformed the conference, and they left the small schools out of it. And today, Montana and Idaho are not schools that are barely on the map.
See, Mel, I guess I'm not too keen on trying to partner with any of it, unless you can find out who the schools are that have your back. But these mainstay institutions, the original members of the Big Ten, I mean, for them to be stabbing Michigan in the back on this, like, man, stop. You got Notre Dame, who's down there, who in 6-7 years, you can form the alliance that shapes the biggest deal in sport. If you got Notre Dame, if you start politicking with USC right now, because USC comes in as a partial member of the Big Ten, they have no real loyalty. It's a money play for them. So why not start forming these alliances right now? So at the end of this deal, when they go to negotiate, talk about the Big Ten, like they have Michigan in the fold, no, you don't have Michigan in it, because Michigan is going to be able to negotiate with their partners, forming a new Big Ten. That is the mindset. If they go through with this, at least that should be the mindset, in my opinion. They are counting on the mindset that we've seen here in the past. It's the tradition and loyalty, and the Big Ten is one. No, these are partners, business partners.
Yeah.
They're not colleagues. They're not friends. They're not brother. It's not a brotherhood. They are business partners, and your business partner is trying to screw you. So go find another business partner.
I want to make a point about that Michigan is Michigan's not like this. We're talking down the road. So what the Big Ten really wants is to get Harbaugh. That's who they're focused on, right? They saw this thing and they're like, this is our opportunity to get rid of Harbaugh. They wouldn't mind playing Michigan every year if we just have one other coach. They loved playing Michigan every year when Ohio State got to win one side of the conference and Wisconsin got to win the other side of the conference. That's the reality that they want to go back to. They're mad that Harbaugh is winning. They want to get rid of Harbaugh. And as far as all the stuff that they're coming down, you heard them even say, we don't want to hurt the kids. So that's their attack. Michigan had a choice to say, okay, we'll give them Harbaugh because that's what's going to feed these monsters, or we're going to stand behind him. By standing behind him, Michigan now puts the institution on the line. In the Big Ten, the way that they have to respond if Michigan does that is they have to punish the institution, and that's when we start talking about these things. So we're several steps away. But the thing is, Michigan decided they were going to stick behind Harbaugh, and the Big Ten is coming this hard. And all those coaches are coming this hard because they want to get rid of Harbaugh. They don't even think he's a cheater. They think he's a winner, and that's what they're afraid of.
Yeah, the hate for him is strong. That is definitely driving this. You would think that Petiti would be able to see that. This is driven strictly by, they're getting beat, but they hate Jim Harbaugh to the point where they can't. Logic and reason is flown out the window for these guys. And so a leader would be able to see that. I'll give you guys a quick story. I was talking to a coach from another school. I told this story on the air yesterday. Talking to a coach from another school who is just convinced that not only did Michigan have their signs, he was convinced that Michigan had their playbook. They hacked us. They have our play. They had all our plays. I said, man, well, what makes you say that? Well, I made this move and I made that move, and they had the right counter. It's like, you sure they didn't just kind of scout you in game and figure some things out? Well, no. How do you explain this second half scoring margin? They're setting records. So let's play this out. Let's play this out for a second. So they not only have your signs, they have your playbook, and they wait till halftime to use those tools. That's what you're telling. You understand how ridiculous that sounds right now. But that's how these coaches are coming at Tony Petitti, and he cannot see that these people can't see past their hate for Jim Harbaugh. That is what this is, just a stand-in for what the real issue is. They're getting beaten, and they're getting beaten by a guy they hate. And this is an opportunity to wedge him out. And he's letting them do it. Or at least he's letting them try to do it. Letting them use him.
That's a good point. That's a good one. He might notice Michigan is lawyered up and is just going to throw down whatever they want him to, because he knows it's going to get knocked down in court, and he can come back and be like, I tried, guys. It's still very, very weak leadership, and all it's going to do is demonstrate that you can do this again anytime that you want to. If Nebraska gets really good, everyone's just going to come after Nebraska. Let's just say, find something. They're always cheating. Everyone's cheating in this sport because the rule book is a gazillion pages long and no one knows how to understand it.
Well, supposedly there's a Bruce Feldman article that's going to come out today. He's mentioned this, I think, on the Rich Eisen show, where there are other programs who have done this off-campus scouting, and the NCAA has completely ignored it. They've been informed, and they don't care. So if that comes out today, and then the Big Ten suspends Jim Harbaugh, I just don't understand how that's any more tenable. Like, people were talking earlier on this podcast about how Petitti can't back off now. It's like, yeah, he could, because he keeps getting new information that proves that this is not the greatest scandal in the history of the Big Ten, which, I mean, how stupid do you have to be to believe that? Dan Wetzel was incredulous about this on his podcast, and I appreciate that, because it really kind of puts that into relief. How unbelievably stupid do you have to be to believe a tenth of that? Like, the guy got in the room with 13 people yelling at him, and he showed him his belly. It's like, bro, you are not cut out for this. This is not your job.
Yeah, I saw that Feldman said this. And the reason why probably the NCAA did nothing was that they don't believe this provides any real advantage. And a lot of this is being driven. In fact, they said so explicitly 2 years ago. And I believe a lot of this is being driven by the notion of, quote, sign stealing, and the fact that the general population thinks that's somehow a major violation. And this is not about sign stealing at all. It's about advanced scouting. And that's because that's the only thing that Stallions did that was against the rules. And, from my point of view, I think Brian's right that Petitti could come in and show leadership by saying, I was buffaloed here. I was stampeded. I made a mistake. We'll wait and see what the NCAA does, because after all, as Brian points out, yesterday, Rule 32.22C says the Big Ten does nothing until the NCAA has finished their investigation.
Yeah, when there's an NCAA investigation, the Big Ten is not supposed to do anything. Now, there is still a possibility that there's a lot of lawyers in my email right now, if you can imagine. But the commissioner is still allowed to suspend for 2 games for pretty much anything. And my thought that's what he was going to do. I thought he would take all these idiots, and then when he was done, they were going to come to Michigan and be like, okay, you got to sit out a couple games. The idea that he would go beyond that when the bylaws are so ridiculous, it just demonstrates how this guy just cannot lead. And, they hired an idiot. That was Michigan's mistake too. We hired an idiot. But if you go look at the law that they're actually in trouble for breaking, it's the 1994 rule that of in-person scouting right? Which they got rid of because they put it in there because of financial reasons. That it's not fair that Michigan, with all their money, can send people to scout teams in person. That's why that rule exists. So they're saying that Connor Stallions, who was operating this operation by his parents bought him a house and he was renting it out as Airbnb, is where he got the money. That is too much of an advantage. That's the actual argument that they're making. That there's why Michigan is in trouble is because Connor Stallions, whatever he was paying these people to get their film, was too much of a financial advantage. That's the rule we're talking about.
Well, you're arguing, not you, but the people who are like, this is a scandal now, are pretty much reduced to arguing with like, well, Michigan broke the rules. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how you draw a distinction between having a guy in the stands with an iPhone and getting signals from someone who was in person on the sidelines at a previous Michigan game. That's the exact same thing. That is exactly the same.
Except it's a little worse.
Yeah,
I think you have all the coaching staff as opposed to one, analyst out doing it on his own versus an entire coaching staff. Plus, it's worse because you have at least two schools colluding against Michigan for the benefit of another school. Talk about bad sportsmanship.
Hey guys,
yes, but it happens all the time, guys.
The Bruce Feldman article dropped, and it's about the WikiLeaks, and it was a coach came to Clausen years later and said, I reported this to the NCAA, and they didn't do anything with it. But the guy talked about how they had his practice footage, they had his playbook, and they shared that. So that's what the story is going to be about, or is about.
Well, so that's an excellent point, right? Like the WikiLeaks scandal was a giant violation of this in-person scouting rule. It's way worse than anything else that has anything that's happened in the Big Ten, and the NCAA declined to do anything. Now you do have Connor Stallions breaking NCAA rules intentionally, and that reflects on Connor Stallions. And then you have to look at what the rest of the program is doing, and if it provides Michigan a serious competitive advantage. It obviously does not. And if it was reasonable that anyone would be able to know about this based on what Connor Stallions was giving them with his sign stealing stuff. And the answer to that is also no, because people across the league apparently have decoded everyone's signals. So I'm all for Michigan facing the music here, but it has to be proportionate to the benefit gained. The benefit gained was approximately nil. Now you have to respect NCAA rules in general, and this combined with the Burgergate stuff doesn't reflect well. And so there should be something that comes down, but the NCAA is moving away from vacating games and punishing kids. And so what are we talking about here? We're talking about a fine. We're talking about a show cause for Connor Stallions and possibly some sort of suspension for Jim Harbaugh. But we have to actually go through the investigative process to know exactly what Harbaugh is responsible for, if there's a culture of compliance within the athletic department, et cetera, et cetera. And for the Big Ten to step in and be like, is unprecedented. And I want to point out that Alan Haller is lying when he says that it's hypocritical for the Big Ten to not step in here when they stepped in last year after the tunnel incident.
Oh, you mean when they had video evidence right there for everyone to see?
Well, Michigan State suspended those players, and the Big Ten took a full month to investigate and figure out what they wanted to do, and they came back with a fine and another 8-game suspension for Kerry Crump. A month. They did an investigation. They followed their bylaws. And for Alan Haller to first put the crocodile tears on about player safety, give me a break. And then to flat out lie about what happened last year. I mean, it doesn't surprise me coming from that athletic department, but I mean, they are the most shameless athletic department in America. That's why they want to hire
Alan Haller kept Mel Tucker for a year after they knew that he committed, right?
I mean, talk about a lack of leadership, right? But these
talk about an investigation. Let's let all the facts play out before we make a decision.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And you got these guys screaming to the commissioner that if they don't suspend Jim Harbaugh, and also like, if they really believe what they're saying about how this is the greatest scandal in the history of the Big Ten, then the University of Michigan cannot be allowed to compete, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like suspending Harbaugh, I mean, how much is that worth in Vegas? A couple points? That's if you believe that this 21-point advantage that Connor Stallions has provided him, even after he's no longer working for the university, is real. Why do you want to suspend Jim Harbaugh? Why is that what you're going after? So I think it's just personal. It's personal with Jim Harbaugh and the other Big Ten coaches, and the university is right to stand behind him. I certainly hope that they get their restraining order, and I would like to see everyone pound sand.
Yeah. There's a little side story I just thought of. I don't know how salient it is, but when Rich Rod came to Michigan, his playbook, the West Virginia playbook, was on the internet. Someone posted his entire playbook. So I saw it, I copied it, and I think I still have it. And so I went to Calvin McGee, who was the offensive coordinator, and I said, "Hey, did you know your whole playbook is like out there on the internet?" He goes, "Yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter." I said, "What do you mean?" He said to me, "Look, everybody knows what we do. It's no secret anymore. If we got guys who can execute, it won't matter. And if we don't, it won't matter. Playbook don't mean a damn thing." So in any event, that was out there. I have a copy. I suspect Ohio State and everybody else had a copy too. I got it sitting in my stack right over here.
You want to see someone in the right play call. Go back and watch every one of Michigan's touchdowns in 2022 against Ohio State. The only one where Ohio State didn't react to the play call like the Michigan actually called was the one right by the goal line when they just ran in with McCarthy. All the other ones, there was one was it the 85 or the 75 where like they're running a scrape exchange. They have one guy for the quarterback and one guy for the running back, and if both those players do what they're supposed to do, Michigan is stuffed in the backfield on 3rd and 3. And that's the 85-yard touchdown. But what happens? One of the guys holds up a little bit because he's a little afraid of J.J. McCarthy, and then Michigan gets a block, and there's no safety because they used the safety because they knew what the play was coming, and Michigan scores an 85-yard touchdown. And if you go back and look at all the rest of those plays that Michigan scored on, Ohio State is actually covering the first read, or has a blitz on, or is not paying any attention to two guys who are running play action. That kind of stuff does not matter that much in football. This is what all the people in football have been saying. As soon as this came out, anyone who knew ball was laughing because they're like, sign stealing. Everyone steals signs.
Yeah. Well, this isn't about sign stealing.
Just put radios in the helmets next weekend and never talk about this again.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the Big Ten doesn't need the NCAA to do that. They probably do, but if they ask the NCAA is going to say sure. Sure, right. I mean, they can do it in Big Ten games. They just say, "Well, this is what we're doing. If you have a problem, tell us."
Well, if it's a player safety issue, I mean, what are we waiting on, right?
Right.
You should be using the technology immediately, right?
If it's a player safety issue,
right? I mean, they don't have to ask the NCAA about concussion protocol. I mean, if the Big Ten goes in and can say this is what we want you to do. So why, if it's a player safety issue, why can't they just put him in? If Radio Shack was still in existence, cost you $10 a team, and I mean, so the whole thing is, an absurdity top to bottom.
Even Rutgers can't afford that technology.
We'll pay for it. Rutgers can't afford it. Michigan will pay for it.
Right. It's ridiculous that we are here. But I like the change in posture from the University of Michigan. I talked about it in the last hour. One of the worst days for me and my love of Michigan was when they fell on the sword for the Ed Martin deal. It's like that's just. I've always thought that was ridiculous. I will continue to think it was ridiculous because if that was a violation for Michigan, and I'm not saying it's not, but then it's a violation for everyone because he sent players everywhere. And so that should have been the posture that they took to mitigate punishment, not to avoid punishment, but to mitigate punishment.
And so now he's in the car. Mateen Cleaves, who won a national championship for Michigan State, was in the car, man.
Come on. You're making too much sense. So this Michigan, though, has learned from the mistakes of the past. You do not concede, especially when you have a good case, and especially when you can look around and see what everyone else is doing. No, we are not going to suspend our coach indefinitely. It's like he actually thought they were going to say, okay, yeah, it's such great shame. Like, you really thought they were going to say okay to that.
If you are only paying attention to Buckeyes right now, if you like just got rid of everybody else's thoughts and just listen to Buckeyes, including Buckeyes that I used to have a lot more respect for, like that's where this like bubble of information is coming from. And that's what I'm afraid of, that like the people he's listening to are the people who talk like that. There is absolutely no rationality. There is no attempt to understand football or understand what this is about. And even when it comes back that they're doing the same exact thing, they just very quickly go, oh, well, that's not against the rules, and what you did was. And still go back to saying this is the biggest scandal of all time. This is not a rational group of people. And when you see what Petitti's doing, it looks like he is talking to these irrational idiots, because that's what he is.
We need to slide in a quick break. We'll come back on the other side. Maybe we'll get a little football in, talk about Michigan, Penn State, a little bit of Michigan, Purdue recap, but got to preview this game coming up, so we'll get into that a little on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
So Sam, do you think the Big Ten will come down with anything today at all? Or will they wait till tomorrow when the courts are closed?
Yeah, well, the courts aren't closed for the purposes of a TRO.
I understand.
Yeah.
You're a lawyer.
So that was expressed to me yesterday. They aren't concerned about it coming down tomorrow. It'd be some BS if it came down tomorrow, because it puts them even more under the gun.
Well, I think it helps their case, doesn't it?
It would show that they're petty. Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. That would help their case in the long run. It helped their case for an injunction too. Like, look, the timing of this is purposeful.
Hey, Brian, now's your chance to talk about Kirk Ferentz if you want to get back to that. Now's a great time.
Yeah, they could come down with this yesterday. And the folks I talked to said they think something's coming down today. So
well, Samuel just tweeted that the Big Ten is reviewing the lengthy written responses from both Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. There's no timetable, which is like that's your source told you what? Like, they're looking at the documents? Like, that's not news.
That doesn't take a few minutes.
It is news right now that Buckeyes can read.
Here's the I mean, you hope that he got intimidated by state government coming after, letting him know that, hey, it's not going to just be Michigan and Jim Harbaugh that sue you. Maybe that is getting him to think twice, but
that's 11 guys, though. It's not like like needle. I don't think that really helped. I kind of
one of them was the founder of Off Tackle Empire, by the way.
Yeah, which is like, I didn't like that guy.
I'm not surprised he became a politician. I'll say that.
It's like when Ace started a website with Buckeye fans that I had already all blocked.
Yeah. No, man. We'll see if they decided to wait, though. That wait past this week, that would almost be worse, because then now you're putting in play, if they're talking about a 2-game suspension, which is what it sounds like they're talking about now, because I was told earlier in the week there's been some progress, as these talks go on behind the scenes, but they're still talking 2 games. And if you skip past Penn State, then obviously, I mean.
But it seemed like, Sam, that Michigan wasn't going to accept 2 games.
They're not.
I mean,
if you come in, here's the thing. I think the expectation was that he was going to come to town with this, talking about 2-game suspension under the sportsmanship policy, and Michigan was going to explain to him why this is unwarranted. You're at least having a conversation at that point. But he came in talking about indefinite suspension. It's like, what are you talking about? You basically, you're saying you want us to fire Jim Harbaugh over this, because pending the result of the investigation, they take 3 years. How can we have a head coach suspended indefinitely. That doesn't even make any sense. Like, that's not a good faith argument. You aren't really trying to get something done here. So I think they got to the point where they said, listen, now we know we're going to have to sue. And especially now that we got more information coming our way about the seriousness of this violation and just basically how rogue this guy really was. He just wasn't. This was not a bad thing. It just, you got to it in a bad way. Getting Stallions out.
Back in about 30 seconds, guys.
Just happened in a bad way. So they had a cyst they needed to excise here, and they had to do it, unfortunately, in a very public way. But this was not a league that was driven by the seriousness of that offense. This is the league that was driven by getting beat down by a coach in very embarrassing fashion, and a dislike that Jim Harbaugh's never been a part of the club. He just is too green to know what this is all about. Unfortunately,
10 seconds, guys. And back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we're back here on MGoBlog Roundtable on the Michigan Insider. So, guys, one last note. Talk about the lack of common sense for Tony Petitti. Hearing everything that he heard, seeing all the evidence that he's seen and is seeing, you would think it would make him realize that if he went through with it, forget the fairness or lack thereof, the impact of this move is nothing but appeasement, because Michigan will get an injunction. So then what is it all for? If the people who want a pound of flesh don't actually get it, then what was this all for? How he can't see that argument is beyond me. Now, that's what I would expect a non-football guy to have some common sense still be able to figure out, because I just don't think Jim Harbaugh will miss any time. Even if they came down tomorrow, I think they get an injunction in time for him to coach.
You like I've heard differing opinions on this about how likely Michigan is to actually get the injunction.
Well, I mean, what do you got to show? You have to show irreparable harm. If you don't get the injunction and immediate harm, they win there. You have to show there's no adequate remedy at law. They win there, which means money damages isn't a substitute. And they have to show that there is a likelihood of success to get in order to get a temporary restraining order. Now, the likelihood of success is judged on a preponderance of the evidence standard, which means more likely than not. I think, given the fact that it seems to me the Big Ten isn't really even following their own rules, at least in the broad picture, that it's at least more likely than not that they would get, they could reach that standard. And there are other things that can be thrown in the stew, other behaviors by Big Ten coaches and staffs that help. So yeah, I think it's more likely than not that Michigan would get a TRO.
And they have a dream team of lawyers.
Yeah, they have better lawyers than me, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine the team that hired. I understand what Brian's saying, and I think that there is a concern. I just don't trust the people who hired Tony Petitti to have to be able to put this together in a way that's going to stand up. And in fact, they were ready to hand it down before they even realized that Michigan was going to take a legal route. And then they stopped and they pulled back and they waited and they had to put together a new document because the first one that they had was not going to hold up. So they already are on multiple drafts of this because they didn't even realize they were going to court.
I mean, even if Michigan just had Tom Mars, who has just wiped the floor with the NCAA, this is like small potatoes to him. So he's going to be Jim Harbaugh's piece of this. Then you got this Williams and Connolly law firm out of D.C. I think you're talking about a group in the Big Ten that's overmatched. But real quick, let's get some actual football talk in. Real quick, your quick thoughts on Michigan coming off the bye against Purdue. Your takeaways from that game, Brian.
A little bit sloppier than they've been in the past, which I think is inevitable. You're going to have some games where you're just a little bit off. JJ McCarthy had some misses, had some throws that could have been caught, but his receivers didn't quite help him out. I'm not too bothered about the run game just because, they're +1 in the box, and Michigan doesn't really throw a whole lot of constraints at a team that's really overplaying Michigan's interior run. They don't run JJ. As soon as they do go to a constraint, it's a 44-yard touchdown for Morgan or the end around. Like, to me, the most interesting thing offensively was that was the first game where Michigan was very pass forward, which I think was probably a choice. They knew they were going to beat this team. They knew that there are bigger tests coming up, and they wanted to see what it felt like when JJ McCarthy's throwing 37 times in a game. And for the most part, came out pretty well. Michigan fans are terribly spoiled right now because it's like, well, why didn't he complete 80% of his passes? Because you look at what he did, it is like, okay, he completed 2/3 of his passes for 9.1 yards an attempt, and everybody's like, I'm a little worried about this. So, but it is a thing where he can play better, and he has played better, and I think he will play better.
So, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, Purdue, as Brian said, was +1 in the box. They put a nose tackle in, and they put 2 tackles. So the inside, so they're playing 3 tackles in the middle, makes it difficult to run the ball on the interior. I wonder if this is why, among other reasons, Michigan flirted with outside zone early in the year, and that was a flop. But one way of, I think, beating that is using JJ as a threat. They're not using JJ as a threat at this moment. They will this weekend if they need to, or they probably, the answer to that is they will. And I don't see Penn State either coming down with this sort of a defense. However, I do think they'll play a lot of man, and Purdue did play some zone more than they had all year, I believe, but they did play a lot of man, and they got killed on it.
Yeah, it is remarkable. They had 4 zone snaps against Ohio State, as Alex charted, and it just kind of felt like they were laying down for them. And maybe they're just really mad at Michigan, so they saved all this stuff for a game that they were just not going to win. Anyway, Seth.
Yeah, defensively, it was it was another pounding. The only reason Purdue scored at all was they had the last play, and then they had their we had a turnover on special teams, and then a turnover on downs. The other one was Waller just kind of losing his controller unplugged, as Brian said. It was interesting that Michigan kept on trying lots of different personnel on the outside at cornerback. So they had very early in the game, they had Walker in, they have Waller in, they have Samer still in the beginning of the second half, so they could try McBurrows at nickel. So they are definitely trying to figure out who they have at cornerback right now. And then later when I was worried about getting zone runs on us, Michigan was playing -1 in the box by that point. As soon as they got up by 20, they're like, okay, let's go back to repping Ohio State. And this was a good chance to do that because this is one of the only teams that was actually willing to try to throw the ball. But Purdue's tackles are so bad. Their offensive tackles are just so bad. So at one point, Purdue puts their center out at right tackle, and they move their right tackle to left tackle. That doesn't work. They have to go back. But it was an interesting look at our interior guys got moved a little bit. Kenneth Grant came in for a little bit lower score than normal. Mason Graham still looked like Mason Graham. Jenkins still looked like Jenkins. So I think now we've actually seen a decent interior offensive line play Michigan, and Penn State's probably not going to be the same test. But, I think Ohio State's got a decent interior line, and now we know what we've got for those guys. So going forward, this game, Penn State expecting to see much tighter rotation, and then I think this team can handle the Penn State pretty well.
Yeah, I expect to see the full run menu. You and Brian nailed it. I mean, look, they took JJ off the board, and you know that by the fact that they only ran one duo in the entire game, and it's their marquee run play. And
the way Purdue plays, you can't really run duo, right? Because they've got
if you put a read on it, you can.
Well, yeah, I
You
guess
can. And they decided not to. Hey, we are not going to run JJ. And so if you're not going to run JJ, then you're right. You aren't running duo against this team. They closed down all the inside gaps. They're bringing guys off the edge. So when the running back bends it off the mic, it's just not going anywhere. So how do you counter that? JJ McCarthy. And that's what you're going to see. Now, it's a different defense, but the point is, look, Michigan's perimeter run game, their best perimeter run threat is JJ McCarthy. That's going to be on the table against Penn State. They got a lot more to account for. Now, will they try to account for JJ in the way? This is the first time, like, we've seen spies. Purdue would double spy him. Like, they were just extremely concerned about JJ getting out of the pocket. And I wonder if we're going to see other teams kind of get to the point of this. Let's see if making him a pocket passer is the answer. If you watch that Purdue game, you're probably thinking that's foolhardy because he was outstanding yardage wise in the pocket. And I think that people are underselling his ability to just drop back and pick you apart. And he only had 4 play passes in the whole. How many times he throw? Like 37?
Yeah, they got his feet moving a little bit though. When he tried, because he likes to get out of the pocket and start rolling around. And there was a couple times here where he takes that step, and there's a guy he can't get out of there, and he just kind of moves his feet around and then throws an inaccurate ball. And there might be a little something to that.
I don't think so. I think he was rusty coming off the bye. That was it.
Yeah,
that was it. We'll see. The grand scheme of things. I thought defensively. You talk about the second quarter. I thought Josh Wallace had played his best football before, before obviously not being out there in the second half. So I'm encouraged.
I appreciate the fact that Purdue actually tried to play offense. Because I haven't managed to have an opinion on the secondary all year because it's just dinking and dunking around the line of scrimmage and just trying to throw fades, and it's just junk. And Purdue was very unsuccessful at running offense, but they tried. And so we got a really good game from Will Johnson that kind of announces that he's all the way back. We got flashes from Rod Moore. Like, those were kind of the 2 big question marks because, they missed big chunks of the early part of the season, and then they look a little rusty against Nebraska and other teams. And it's like, all right, well, we need these guys for the stretch run. And I think that they're fully actualized and back to their 2022 stuff. Can we briefly touch on the basketball team?
Oh,
yeah, just real quick. How good do you guys really think Penn State is? I mean,
I think Penn State is Iowa with a finished basement, as someone on the internet said.
You think can Michigan go in there and blow this team out?
Yes. How are they going to score points? How are they going to score points?
Well,
Penn State's not going to move. That can't move the ball. Their defense is legit. I've been talking up their defense all year.
Yeah.
So I already gave you my paranoia off the air, so I'm not saying anything. We're a better team.
Hey,
I was trying to segue to basketball there.
If Doug McDaniel is like that, the prognostications about Michigan, they're off anyway.
Yeah,
but they're so far off if he can play like that.
Well,
that's a different dude.
The way I think about it is, so we got some one and dones the last couple of years. Those one and dones were not good basketball players. Like Michigan was worse by 7 points per 100 possession with Jet Howard on the floor than off the floor. They were getting the wrong one and dones. The one and dones you need to get are 5th-year seniors who played on top 5 defensive efficiency teams. And that's Kamwa, and that's Namari Burnett. And Burnett's not a senior, but he's been around the block. And these guys are going to be much, much better than the freshmen that Michigan has lost to the NBA draft. And they're going to be much better defensively. Kamwa's super versatile. Like, Terrace is going to be able to do things that he wasn't able to do last year because the whole team was built around drop coverage. And I think Michigan's going to surprise. The only thing that kind of worries me is they are completely dependent on Doug.
Yes, they are.
Like, when he had some brief moments where he was on the bench and Namari Burnett was trying to run the show as a point guard, that looked very awkward. And so they really need to just kind of hold the fort until they can get Llewellyn back. And Llewellyn needs to be a good 10, 15 minute a game backup guard because, yeah, I mean, they really miss Caleb Love, right? That would be kind of a big deal for this team. I still think that this team is going to be the biggest Ewing theory team of the last decade in the Big Ten. Because
what's the Ewing theory?
Ewing theory is a Bill Simmons theory that whenever Patrick Ewing was not playing for the Knicks, they were a lot better.
Oh.
And you wouldn't expect that, but sometimes that's the case. And when you take away two very bad defensive players who were the offensive engines of last year's team, everybody looks at that team and they're like, well, they can't score. They don't look at the fact that the defensive upgrade from Jet Howard to Namari Burnett and from Kamwa and Terrace Reed to Dickinson is giant. So I'm looking forward to the season, and I think they're not going to contend for the Big Ten, but I think that they'll be significantly improved, and they won't be on the bubble by the time the tournament rolls around, as long as Doug McDaniel stays healthy.
I want to talk about this a lot. I've seen a practice. I saw the open scrimmage, saw the exhibition game, saw them last night, and talked to people about what happened at Marquette. Incidentally, they beat Marquette in a 48-minute game. Marquette's number 11 and Ken Palm number 5 on the human polls. And the word Brian used is the same one that Martelli's been using, which is versatile. And I was happy to hear Brian say that notice and say that they've gotten rid of drop coverage, not one single possession of drop coverage, which I despise. And because they had to do it with Hunter, and they're actually hedging and recovering, which is actual basketball, and it's working. And for them so far, I
wanted to get in real quick. This team is scoring, man. And we didn't think this team was going to be able to score. They're running the floor. They're making their baskets. Some of the guys, like Namari Burnett, we didn't know if he could shoot. It looks like he can. They're scoring.
Yep. All right, that's going to do it for us, folks. We'll see you again tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the Ticket, the official voice of the University.